Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Airing Room, where we open up honest conversations about damp, mould, housing, and the real challenges behind providing good homes. Today, I'm joined by Dawn, who's a private landlord, who's here to share her perspective on what it really takes to balance tenant needs, rising costs, and the changing landscape of housing legislation. So, Dawn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for asking me.
Welcome. How long have you been a landlord?
I've been a landlord since 2012.
And what made you get into it?
Me and my husband have always had a passion for property. And when I say a passion for property, we took a lot of pride in our personal private home. And we identified quite quickly that we had to start saving money for pensions and things like that. And we both felt that property would be a good avenue to go down. And we bought our first in 2012. And it was what they call a latchkey property. So we didn't really need to do much to it. And we've had that since 2012, and we've only ever had 2 tenants. And we found that we enjoyed, looking after people, providing a nice home for somebody. And obviously we got the benefits of a long-term investment, something that we could leave to our daughter. And that's how it started.
Amazing. Okay, so first question, really going into it, is like, what does providing a good home mean to you personally? Because you say you're passionate about providing homes, but what does good mean to you?
Good to me is I will only buy properties that I personally would live in myself. And because I think that if I'm prepared to live there myself, then 90% of other people would be happy to live there as well. And that's because I take pride in my home, and I like to look after things, and I do want a long-term investment. And my genuine, the ethos that I have is basically, if you look after my home and I will look after you.
Love that.
That's it.
Yeah, love it. It's as simple, isn't it? Everyone has the right to have a home, but it is, being a good landlord is just as important as being a good tenant. It's a partnership.
It is, yeah. And my daughter, she's renting at the moment for her own personal reasons. I want to, if she's living in a nice home and she's happy and she's comfortable, then I'm happy and I feel comfortable. And whether it's my daughter or whether it's anybody else, I don't want the hassle of issues with constant what's the word? Well, I don't want the hassle just as much as the tenant doesn't want the hassle of issues. And I want it to be as plain and as smooth sailing as physically possible. So the homes that I provide, they're renovated, they're refurbished, they're up to date with all their electrics, they're up to date with all the required ventilation, everything that you need really to live in a safe environment. And I'm doing it for the long term.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of just think like what you're saying about ventilation and making sure that your properties are healthy. Obviously, can you just share kind of how you found out about us at DampSmart and what that experience was like for you as a landlord?
Yes, we'd recently renovated a property, and we'd got a couple of relatively young tenants that had never, rented before. They'd previously lived with parents, so it was very, very new to them, the experience of running their own home. And we, as you do, you provide extractor fans, air vents, everything that you need to make sure that the house works to its best capacity, really. And it was quite let's put it this way. How do I put it? Basically, what happened is they were using one of the rooms as somewhere to just throw all their spare stuff. It was basically a junk room, and that's where they would dry out all their clothes in winter, and they turned the heating off because they didn't think they needed it, because they weren't using the room, but they didn't open the window either. And it slowly started to build up condensation, and they got a little bit upset by it, and they asked us to look into it, and they was convinced that it was damp, the property was damp. And when we had a look at it, we explained to them that it wasn't damp, it was just, lack of ventilation, it was a buildup of condensation, and there was no air circulating through. They weren't comfortable with that answer. So my husband, he spoke to various people, NRLA, Landlords Association, and he come across DampSmart. And after speaking to Leonard, he explained this little device where you plug it in and it just monitors the temperature and humidity of each room. So we tried it, and after just a week of the device being in the house, we got an interim report from Leonard, and it was very simple to understand, was the report. And it just lit up like a Belisha beacon, because every single room, apart from that room that they were using as their spare room, was showing a consistent temperature of 21 degrees and humidity at 50 to 56%, which is ideal. However, this particular room, it was showing at 13 degrees with a humidity of 82%. So with that evidence, we could then show them something tangible and say, look, this is the reason why you're getting a buildup of condensation. This is the reason why you've got, this black mold around your windows. All you need to do is open your window or turn the heating up a little bit. It's not going to cost you any extra. And your clothes will dry out a lot quicker because you've got heating on, and it will just circulate the air. And it helped them to really understand that it wasn't the landlord's fault. And that's where you need to have that fine balance of, the landlord has a responsibility, but also the tenant has a responsibility as well. And it's identifying, who's accountable in any particular situation. And in my situation, it was tenant that was accountable.
Yeah. So even though you and your husband had a suspicion that there was a cold room, you didn't have the evidence particularly to back it up. So the report was that kind of insight that you needed to be able to go, look, it's a behaviour change that's needed.
Yes, in that particular instance, yes, it were. I mean, I appreciate there are instances out there where, it can be the responsibility of the landlord, whether it's, damp-proof course, failure, or, anything, just a leaky guttering, but the device itself, if it's used quickly, and effectively, then I genuinely feel that a lot of these issues can be eradicated quite quickly if there is a communication directly between the landlord and the tenant. It's like if a tenant has got an issue with something and they're coming to the landlord saying, oh, I've got damp, I've got condensation, I've got mould, and you need to sort it out quickly. Your device, it can help identify or point an arrow into which direction that you need to be going. And I think if a tenant is doing everything that they possibly can to to eradicate it, then they're not gonna resist having your little device in the house, because they're going to want to get to they're going to want to get a resolution as much as you do. And if there is some resistance, then you do have to question whether is the tenant actually doing what they say they're doing to eradicate the damp, the mold, the condensation. And in all fairness, as a landlord, I personally would want to know about it as soon as physically possible, even if there's just a few little patches in the corner of a wall. I'd want to know about it straight away, because as a landlord, if it's left and it develops into a massive problem, then it's going to cost you an absolute fortune to sort it out. And you know, the rent that you're going to receive for the next 12 months or even 2 years, even, it's going to take that to cover the cost of sorting it out. So it's in the landlord's interest and the tenant's interest to work together quickly, smartly and effectively to eradicate it. That's where your device comes in, because it'll direct them. Is it a condensation problem? Is it the tenant's responsibility? Or is there leaking water? Is there damp proof course issue? Have I got a leaky guttering? Is there a hole in the roof? Right, landlord, sort it out now. And it's in the best interest of both parties to work together and sort it quickly.
I do a divert question a little bit here. So we've spoken about this before, but the importance of the relationship that you have with a tenant, you really advocate for that. You're not a fan of using property management companies or agents. You like to have that direct communication, don't you?
I do, yes. And I'm not saying I've never experienced the use of property management, because I have. However, my experience of having a middleman, as you call it, didn't work for me. Because for me, it just added another barrier to the relationship with the tenant, because I like to see myself as a landlord who is approachable, and and I always use the same scenario. If my daughter was in a situation where she needed to ring somebody in an emergency, I'd want them to be able to ring me at any time, day or night. And I think the relationship is very, very, very important. And then it also, on the back of that, you have to look at yourself as a landlord. What kind of landlord do you want to be? And are you doing this for? And if you're doing it for long-term investment, a legacy for your family and for your children, then you need to take it very seriously, and you need to have that relationship with your tenant in order for, like I said earlier on, you look after my house, I will look after you. And that's pretty much the crux of it.
Yeah. Well, it is, protecting your investment, isn't it? If you've got happy tenants, you're going to have a happy house.
Yes.
So bearing that in mind, then obviously, like, you do have general standard repairs that come in, I imagine, especially if you have long-term tenants. But what's the biggest challenge that you faced in balancing tenants' needs with the cost of running a property?
Because I manage the lettings myself, and I do it with the support of the MLA, which I'm a massive advocate of, because they're there for you. And I've found them brilliant when it comes to seeking guidance and advice, especially on the new legislation, the regulation that's coming in. With having them as a support network, I feel 100% comfortable managing my own letting. So that is a cost saved straight away. Because as a landlord, you've got, agents' fees to pay, whether it be an upfront initial fee, and then you've got the monthly management fee. And what I like to do is I like to balance that, and I in some cases, if I can, pass that on to my tenant. So my rent is not necessarily at the same level as others in that area because of the added costs. And because I feel strongly about my tenant coming to me as soon as there is the slightest issue, whether it's a key that's just not fitting right in the door, don't just leave it until the whole mechanism of the door breaks down. Just tell me straight away, and we just change the the casing. That to me saves a massive cost in the long run, because it'll cost me 20 or 30 pounds to change that casing, locking mechanism, rather than changing a whole door because they've not told me about it for 12 months.
Yeah.
So, but it is a challenging time because, yeah, there could be new legislation coming in and rising costs. But if you're going to pass on your costs to your tenant, then you make them aware up front. You try to keep them as low as you possibly can. But again, it's just setting that expectation and communicating, look, your rent's not going to go up, for the next 12 months. However, we may need to increase it, and just let them know and let them be prepared for it.
Yeah, and I mean, in the way that the UK is at the moment in regards to, mortgages and things like that, that it was at a really low percentage and then it's hiked right up really high. And, if you've tied into a 12-month contract with a tenant and then all of a sudden your mortgage has gone up by £600, it's kind of, it's a very challenging time, I can imagine.
It is. And I think with my background in finance, I look at that when I set the rent payment, and if I say, for instance, I fix my deals in 5 years, say for instance, just to get the longevity in order for the rent to increase on an annual basis, and then predict what the estimated percentage rates are going to be at that certain period of time, then if you can adjust your rent accordingly with the increases, then when the time does come that the rates are, your rate is going to come to an end, and you've predicted what it potentially could be, looking at historical data, there's a fine margin that you need to work with, but you have to be prepared for that. And I think with in the last couple of years, when that did happen, where the rates were so low, people fixed in, and now they come out of it and it's that, like, oh my gosh. Then again, as a landlord, as a long-term investment, this is not something that you can just enter into lightly. It's not something that you can just, I'm going to buy a house and I'm going to rent it out, because you're playing with people's lives. You're providing a home for somebody, potentially, what could be long-term. And if you've got short-term aspirations, then you really need to think about whether it's something that you really want to do.
Very well said. Very well said indeed. People, they get their first home, even their first rental. I've done social housing, I've been a private renter. Fortunately, I'm a homeowner now. But, you move into a home, you've got friends who have small children, and all of a sudden the landlord decides to sell, or, someone in the family's died, they need to release the assets. All of a sudden that whole family's life is up in chaos because they need to have a roof over their heads.
Yeah. And that's not what I buy the homes for. It's I get the reason why people do it, and I understand that people's circumstances can change. But there are the sort of things that you do need to look at and anticipate if that scenario were to arise. Do you have a plan B?
Yeah.
Because it's not easy to ask a tenant to vacate. Because I am a conscientious landlord, then I put myself in their shoes and think, how would that make me feel? How would it? I keep going back to it. It's my daughter. How would it make my daughter's, studying in a different county, and she's going to be there for 3 years. But if the landlord decided all of a sudden they wanted to sell it for whatever reason, then my daughter's got to find somewhere else to live. And I look at it from that perspective. How would I feel if that was happening to me? So I've walked into this with my eyes wide open. And I think that's where sometimes not everybody does that.
Yeah. You know, that human element, isn't it? And I think, you know, people think property, money, and this, that, and the other, but actually property equals people's lives and people's homes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you touched on it slightly. So we got new regulations and stuff coming in. So the next big change kind of within social housing is going to be the Awaabs law that's coming in at the end of October.
Mm.
So obviously that's around social landlords, but how do you see Awaab's law influencing or any change to the role of a private landlord?
I in terms of commenting on that actual personal circumstance for that family, it's dreadful. From what I've read, it's absolutely dreadful, and that should never happen in this day and age or society. It shouldn't. I know it does, and it has, and it shouldn't. And I will choose my words very carefully as to not upset or offend anybody. However, I think there's a lot of landlords out there that are frightened to death of damp, the word damp, the word mold, the word condensation, because there is such a big emphasis on how it can affect somebody. However, it only gets to that if it's left. And it just goes back to, if you've got a relationship with your tenant and they feel confident to come to you, then it shouldn't even get to that point. Now, I appreciate in that particular circumstance, they went to their landlord or social housing a number of times. And again, that's another debate, because social housing is a different beast, in my opinion. But there's a lot of very, very good landlords out there, but they're just frightened to death of the word because they're not educated on it.
Yeah. And, you know, like you say, you know, you can't comment kind of on every single social housing provider, but there are some amazing social housing providers out there. You know, I've worked hand in hand with some amazing housing officers, and I can only imagine the pressure that they must be feeling knowing that this is looming, you know, and it's kind of that unknown, I think, that's just so scary. But I think it's another conversation we've had, Dawn, where you spoke about understanding your portfolio and what your home is and educating the tenant around that. Do you want to like just elaborate a little bit on that for us?
Yes, and I think first and foremost, as a landlord, you need to understand the property that you've bought, and you need to understand the mechanics of it, how it works, how it needs to be operated for it to work effectively, to eradicate these kind of problems. And it's like, I don't always use the PIV units, but I use extractors in the bathroom, say for instance. And people might say I'm being flippant when I say this, but do you know what? It's so simple to deal with. Is just open a window. You just you know you just ventilate the property, and you have it at a certain temperature in the winter months, to a degree where it's at a constant level. Now, you know, it's a well-known fact that if you have your property at a certain level throughout the winter months, then it is more cost effective. And yet there could be times where you need to put the heating up a little bit more because it's really cold, you are cooking or you're drying your clothes out inside and things like that. And that's where you have to think, okay, so there's a buildup of condensation here, I can see it on my windows, I'll just open the window a little bit. And you only need to do it for half an hour just to let that moisture out. And I educate my tenants to the point where it's just a matter of, as soon as you get out of the bath or the shower, yeah, I appreciate it's cold. You put your dressing gown on, you shut your bathroom door, but just open your window a notch and just let all the moisture out, and then shut it back up again an hour later. It's not really going to make that much.
It doesn't even need to be that long. We've done a couple of reports, Dawn, on properties where it's just that excess moisture, but it's only for a short period of time. So like you're saying, you've had a shower, you've had a hot bath. We've done reports on properties where literally we can pinpoint it to say, can you open your window for 4 minutes after you've had a shower, then shut it? And that's enough to let it out. So it doesn't even need to be that long. But like you say, it's different things, isn't it? So, you know, fans, dehumidifiers, you know, just our habits. But, you know, especially if you've got lots of people in your home, you know, every extra person, every pet, that's extra moisture. We're cooking more, we're doing this. So it's about understanding that balance between moisture in and moisture out. And like you say, just letting your homes breathe a little bit more easy.
Yeah, it is. And people are really big to, you know, they're really big on, you know, siliconing around everything, and putting this protective wash on your bricks and things like that. Well, the house needs to breathe. It needs to breathe. And if it hasn't got an outlet, then you need to give it one. And every house has got a, you know, virtually every house or every room has got a window. You might have the odd occasion where you've got an internal bathroom. I appreciate that, but that's where you fit a PIV or an extractor. But you know, virtually every room has got a window. So just open it, just a notch.
But you know, it's crazy. So on socials, literally, because obviously I talk about ventilation quite a lot. They're always listening to you. There was this product that I could see where they're literally encouraging people to put these plastic seals all the way around their windows. And you're just like, why?
Yeah. Well, it's going off subject a little bit, but it's like, you know, there's these grants that you can spray foam your loft.
You know.
That is the worst thing you could do. It's the worst thing you could do. But and again, it comes down to a lack of education. And I'm 50 years old. I'll tell you, I'm 50, and my parents we never had a condensation, damp or mold issue when I were growing up, because as soon as you got out of bed, your mum came in, opened your curtains, opened your window. Don't matter. You were downstairs, you were off to school, and then your window was shut again, you know, in the evening, ready for you to get into to climb into bed. And you know, we didn't have the heating on 24/7 because they couldn't afford it. But it's education.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's education on all parties, though, isn't it? It's tenant education and it's landlord education, and you know, making sure that they're kind of meeting in the middle.
Yeah.
So, going to ask a raw one here. Do you feel our current government, or any governments that we've had since you've been a landlord, support landlords enough to meet the new expectations of the regulations that we've got pending?
No, absolutely, categorically, no, I don't. And that I genuinely believe it's lost its common sense approach, to be honest, because I'm very passionate about this. All right, yes, I'm a landlord, but I also think about my tenant as well. And we're living in very much a blame culture, and it's blame the landlord, blame the landlord, blame the landlord. Well, we have to stop that, because it's building up barriers between the landlord, letting agents, tenants, and the government, and there's no collaboration anymore. Ideally, what you want is you want a relationship with your tenant where you're not just looking at, I'm going to blame a landlord, I'm going to sue him, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You need to be looking at it together and looking at a resolution and a solution. And that's where your device came in for me. And that solved it. And it gave us a resolution. It educated the tenant, it educated me, and that was it. End of story. No issues. Each person knew exactly where they stood, and they knew what their responsibility was. And that's what we need to get back to.
Yeah, it is. It's that kind of like almost like the mediator. You could almost have it, you know, with our devices. It's not a person. It's not a subject matter expert. There's no bias. We just put them in and they just live with you. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and it's just a week. It's just a week, and it's tangible, physical, factual evidence. There's no blame. If you've got a tenant that doesn't fully understand condensation, then builds into mold, then builds into, respiratory problems, then, for your own safety as a tenant, raise it with your landlord straight away. Your device will identify that if it is condensation issue. I mean, obviously, if you've got a leaky guttering or you've got a damp proof problem, then yes, your landlord is responsible for that, and that's a completely different entity. But if it's about managing a lifestyle, then your device, it's black and white. It's black
Yeah.
and white. That's the
Well,
problem, or no, it's not the problem, and then you move on to the next.
yeah, exactly that. We've done it in a couple of properties recently where it's been a process of elimination. We know you're ventilating well, we know you're heating really well, but actually, no, the moisture on that wall's still really high. This doesn't make sense. So we know it's not the homeowner's behavior because they're ventilating. We know it's
Yeah.
this, but, it is all of that. But, it's one of the key things that Leonard and I have kind of set out to do, is to make sure that it is an educational thing, because we know that a lot of, I'd say, social landlords more so, are very data rich but very time poor. So they have all of this data, but they've not maybe got as many data analysis people in there that are able to decipher it. So this is what it needs to be. It needs to be tangible and easily understood at any level. So, kind of we're shaping it around that. But yeah, no, really interesting to see what you think about what our government's up to. So again, I'm going to be a bit brave with this question. With all of these upcoming changes in housing law and regulations, many landlords are leaving the sector. Lady I know runs a local estate agent, and I said, what are you finding that this is impacting your rental sector? She said, yeah, I've lost 50% in the last 12 months. Why are you still in it?
I'm still in it because, to the best of my ability, I'm doing it the best that I can. And I'm in it for the long term. And I think things will change. Personally, I think it's good in one respect, that there is this legislation and regulation updating and coming in all the time to protect tenants. I'm totally on board with that, because at the end of the day, if you've got a good tenant, you want to protect that, and to have a relationship on a long-term basis with one tenant is the best a landlord could ask for, to be honest. And like I said, I'm in it for the long term. I'm not necessarily in it for the regular monthly income, because it's a long-term investment for me. I've found I'm good at it, and there are opportunities out there for people to invest in property if they want to be a landlord, but they have to do it for the right reasons. And all this coming in is just it's identifying who's in it for the right reasons and who's in it for the wrong reasons. And that can only be a good thing for
Yeah.
tenants.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people are frightened because it's like, oh, tenant power, but it's not just about that. If you're doing it right in the first place, you've got nothing to be worrying about.
Exactly. And that's pretty much the yeah, that's the crux of it, really. So no, I'm not going to walk away from it, to be honest. If I could get hold of more houses, provide more homes for people, then I will endeavour to do that. And it can only be a good thing moving forward, providing we've got a government, and I'll go back to it, providing we've got a government that will look at it from a common sense approach and not just want to beat landlords with a stick. Because without us landlords, there are going to be a lot of homes that are not going to be suitable for the tenants that need them. And what's going to happen then?
Yeah. Well, we're saying, like, they've got, is it an estimation of 90,000 social homes should be built each year. what's happening then if all of our private landlords are selling up because they no longer want to be a landlord anymore?
Yeah.
What pressure is that going to put on the social housing sector?
Well, and that's it, you see. And not only that, one, where are we going to get the buyers to buy
Mm.
these is from these landlords now? Where are they coming from? And the security for a tenant right now, a lot of them must be living in fear. Because there's situations where landlords are selling up with tenants in situ, as they call it. But then it's not just about someone buying that property with the tenant in situ. That tenant's going to be thinking, what's my new landlord going to be like? Is my rent going to go up? What are they, are they going to kick me out? What are they going to do with it? There's a lot of uncertainty. And I think that's where a lot of it is, a lot of people have lost sight of what's actually important here. And it's really providing somewhere with a long-term safe home. And we all have the human right to live in peace and tranquility.
I think you could have said that any better, Dawn. That was amazing. And just, couldn't agree with you more. So, say we've got, a new generation of landlords kind of coming out. What advice would you give to somebody looking to come into the sector?
Look at it. Think about why you want to do it. Don't just do it for the money, because money is short-lived. It's a long-term strategy. It's a long-term investment, and you need to educate yourself as much as physically possible. And I'm talking, you've got to know the house. You've got to have an idea on how to operate and run a house yourself. You've got to understand, finance, mortgages. If you're going to be putting a mortgage on it, you've got to be able to anticipate when rates are going to change. There's so much you need to fully understand in order to do it properly and effectively and for the long term. It's not for the faint-hearted. I'm going to be honest. It's not for the faint-hearted, and you can have some sleepless nights if you've got a tenant that's unhappy for whatever reason, or you're concerned about something and it's not happening as fast as you want it to in order to resolve the tenant's issue, the legislation and the regulation that's coming in. That's all a lot of uncertainty. So I've been doing it for that long now. It's just second nature to me. I've done it that many times. But yeah, I think as a first time landlord, get as much information as you possibly can from the people that actually do it.
And do it well.
Yeah.
I think that's the really important thing, isn't it? Is that look at people like who's out there. If we could have a Dawn in every city, it would be amazing. But that.
Well, yeah, it's like anything. There are a lot of people. I've had quite a lot of young people come to me, and asking me how I do it and things like that. And yes, I will give them my honest opinion. But if they can overcome those obstacles that I've had to overcome, and they still want to do it, then give it a go. Give it a go, and I'll give you all the support that you need. From an information point of view. But don't go into it with your eyes shut, because you're dealing with people's lives here.
Right. This is going to be the final question for today. And I'm going to have this, I think, at the end of every airing room. And in a way, I want to encourage whoever you say that you want to talk to, whether it's a specific professional or a certain person, to reach out and get in touch. If you could have an open and honest conversation with anybody about damp, mold and housing, who would it be and why?
I'm very much a person, I don't beat around the bush. If I want to know something, I'll go straight to the horse's mouth. And I want to have a conversation with Matthew Pennycup. and he's our senior housing minister, and he oversees housing, social housing and planning. And there is a lot of issues out there right now, hence why they're all scrambling around like headless chickens. And it needs sorting, and we need to change this blame culture into let's resolve this kind of culture, and let's work together, and let's collaborate, and just stop beating landlords. And everybody has to have some form of accountability and responsibility, whoever you are, but work towards a resolution, because at the end of the day, it's people's livelihoods that are being affected, and tenants are being affected most importantly. And the most important thing is people's health.
Healthy, happy homes.
Exactly. Yeah, and everybody has to have some accountability, and our government is where I want to start.
Love that, Dawn. Love to see you sitting down in the Houses of Parliament having a
Oh, just give me an help.
Whilst you're here, Dawn would have them all lined up, have a little conference going, wouldn't you? It's been brilliant. Oh, honestly, Dawn, thank you so much for being with us today. So this kind of brings us to the end of today's conversation. So huge thank you to Dawn for being so open about the realities of being a private landlord in today's climate. What's really kind of stood out is how damp and mould aren't just maintenance issues. It is about health costs and future housing standards. And with legislations like Awaabs coming in, it's clear that roles of landlord is shifting, and conversations like this are more important than ever. So if you've liked today and you've learned something from our conversation, we're trying to help more landlords and tenants tackle these issues head on. So give us a visit, give us a follow, give us a like, and thank you for listening to the Airing Room. Until next time, let's keep airing it out. Thanks, Dawn.
Thank you.